Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Collective. We have another fantastic show for you planned out today. Very excited. We got Seb and Sarah rejoining us. Can't wait to talk to you guys. We're going to be getting into the topic of peace. But before we do that, while I am explaining everything, y'all should be liking the show. You should be subscribing to the channel. You should be getting yourself notified every day that we go live, which is, of course, every day. And if you have any thoughts, questions, comments, anything at all, by all means, put them up in the comment section so we can engage those directly, kind of like this one. Salty jumps in, afternoon all, Merry Christmas, Happy Yuletide. Daniel, afternoon all, good to see you. Like I said, we're going to get into peace, but let's do a quick intro. Sarah, why don't you hit us up, and then we'll carry on with the convo.
Good afternoon now. Merry Christmas. Sarah, I just generally live life and try to do the best I can at it.
Bam, I like it. Clean and brevity. Here we go. Or not anyway. So we're going to be talking about peace. So what is peace? Well, the peace is the absence of war or other hostilities. I can see you guys making fun of me. Don't worry. Peace is the absence of war or other hostilities, an agreement or a treaty to end hostilities, freedom from quarrels and disagreement, as in harmonious relations, public security and order, or inner contentment and serenity. That is just the base definition of peace, but I want to get your guys' thoughts on it. So, when you hear the word peace, what are you thinking, Sarah? You're up first.
So for me, peace always tends to resonate as inner peace, right? And how I can create the most essentially just relaxed environment so that I can feel content in my own space.
I like that. Seb, what about yourself?
Yeah, for me, there's two extremely important currencies as I seem to be getting older. One of them is time, so that's my number one, and number two is peace. Seek it, hold it, and defend it, and that's my inner peace as well. So if anything on the outside affects my inner peace, then I try to fix the things that I have control over to change that. And if that means extricate myself, or if it means even to a certain extent engaging in a behavior that seems counterintuitive to peace in order to gain peace, I can do that also. And so for me, it's all about what are the things that I let into my life. What is feeding my soul? That could be the music I listen to. It could be, for example, yesterday I was running a mental health walk and we had a conversation about how music affects you, how vibration affects you, and what type of inference you have within your own peace by letting certain things into your life. And so for me, when I drive around listening to gangster rap, for example, I turn into a completely different individual. It's not that I don't like the beat, it's not that I don't like things, but ultimately it turns me into a version of myself that is no longer at peace. So I stopped doing it and I started doing certain things that are conducive to keeping the peace. So I'll leave it at that for now, but that can permeate in absolutely every aspect of your life.
I like it. Sean, first thoughts?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is three words: peace of mind. Peace of mind. Not a piece of my mind, but peace of mind. Having that peace in your mind, having that peace in your life, having that peace internally, as Sarah said, and not letting the outward influences, as Seb said, start affecting your peace of mind. Your mindset, as we've been talking about quite a lot recently and throughout the whole year, is impacted by what you let into your mind. So, funnily enough, Seb had mentioned the mental health walk that he just did the other day. Well, not too long after the walk, I got from a couple of different dudes a DM that said how good the mental health walk was. And so they're letting me know because they know that I know Seb. Because I'm connected to them, they're connected to Seb, Seb's connected to me, we're all connected together. And so I'm getting feedback on their peace of mind based on Seb running a program that gives peace of mind, and therefore how he's impacted them, then that impacts me, and then that impacts my day and how I run my program. So peace of mind isn't just a singular discussion. Peace of mind is also a collective discussion.
I like that. I just want to hit on these before we carry on the conversation. Lisa jumped in here and said, hello, everyone. Merry Christmas from Texas. Good to see you. Amy, Merry Christmas, friends. Good to see you, Amy. Steve jumps in. Merry Christmas, Collective. Appreciate you all. Good to see you, Steve. I think this is one of the reasons why I wanted to bring up this conversation in general is that I think out in the world, a lot of people misrepresent internal peace and external peace as the same thing. And that if they have external peace, they will have internal peace. So if they're not under threat or, engaged in some sort of conflict, then they are technically at peace. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on, do you think that that is just a general disconnect? Like people don't understand the difference, or that they've never sought or had that inner peace to know what it is to seek it? Sarah, coming to you first. What do you think?
I think that Seb touched on this a little bit already, but he talked about how his environment directly will impact his internal peace. And when you're talking about how external peace can manifest, there's so many times where I think people haven't really sat with themselves to understand what it means to truly be at peace in your own mind, as Shaun was saying. And so it's uncomfortable to sit with yourself and to have the hard conversation of what will truly bring me peace? What do I need to sacrifice or change in order to achieve this? And it's easier to change the external, right? Because this is what is visual. I can show that I'm at peace because I have a psalm bowl and a meditation cushion, and I do all of these things externally, but it might not actually translate to what is happening inside my own mind. But people, I think, just really don't understand that because it's not something that is easy to practice or truly understand unless one, you have someone helping you, or you have done, that shadow work internally to discover where your own peace is at.
Absolutely. Seb, thoughts on this?
Yeah, I agree with this. It's quite tricky, and if you don't have the self awareness, and if it's difficult for you to dive deep enough within your own self to understand how you even feel, and a lot of people don't realize that. But sometimes, you could be a very anxious person and you have no idea. Like you have anxiety, but you just don't know how deep your anxiety run. And I'll give you an example of this. You're gone on a trip for 3-4 weeks to Hawaii, and you come back to work, and the first email you open, your heart rate goes up by 5 beats. Like imagine how much stress you're on under every single day without even realizing it. And now you went and you were truly sort of a more peaceful version of yourself. And now you have to contend with the fact that you're back to work, and with all that entails, which includes a rise in anxiety and stress and so on. And so I think that in order for somebody to truly know what internal peace feels like, they need to be able to see where they stand, where is their baseline, what are some of the things that are encroaching on that peace, and how many of those things they don't even know are creating issues within the confines of their own person. And so again, in line with what Shaun always says, and what I jumped on the major bandwagon because I truly believe in it, in the sense of adventure, going out there and doing certain things that bring you different feelings and different emotions in different contexts, and really explore to see what it is. Where is it that you find homeostasis? Where is it that you find a perfect sort of calmer version of yourself? And now once you start drawing sort of the roadmap of what that looks like, you can start replacing pieces with things that increase peace within you.
Nice. Shaun, thoughts on this?
Yeah, something that Seb said, he's talking about finding peace. And I think one of the ways that you can do it through adventure, of course, and being curious and having a little bit of passion to do something new. The first time someone goes on the mental health walk with Seb or out on the left coast, because there are other mental health walks across Canada, of course. On the first timers that show up for that walk, they're going to be feeling all the feels. They're going to feel feeling anticipation, the anticipatory response. They're going to be feeling some fear because it's their first time. They don't know how everyone's going to look at them, how they're going to look at everyone else. How should I talk to someone? Should I not talk to someone? Should I bring my dog? Should I leave my dog in the car? All of these unknowns, all these little adventures that they've got to solve, they're going to feel a little bit of all the feels. And so these little micro moments, these little micro adventures, that first walk with people that you don't know too well, those are all good things because that allows you to process life in a different way, just in a bit of a twist, a little bit of a different velocity, a little bit of a different smell and look, and all of that good stuff. And so now when the person's out on that walk, they get to decide the next step, which is, how am I going to engage it? Because that first step that you walk off on, now you're in it. But then you get to decide how you're going to engage with it. Because you can just like hang out by yourself, 10 paces to the rear, kind of looking at your feet, not talking to anyone. Someone sidles up next to you and you say, hi. And that's the extent of the word that you get out. And there's nothing much more. And then the next person drops back. And now you've got 3 people next to you and they're interacting with you. You're not sure how to interact. And all of these moments are little adventures. They're little micro wins. Whether you say a word or don't say a word, the fact remains it's a micro win because you are in a different situation. You're in something new. You're in a new adventure. But you're in an adventure with people who actually care, who are cool, because they're there for the right reasons. You're there for a reason that you're still trying to understand. And so it's a micro win every minute that you're on that walk, little micro wins, little micro adventures. But all along the way, every step that you take, you get to decide how you engage in the adventure. You don't have to say anything. You don't even have to listen to anyone. You can hang out way at the back and just kind of be party to the party. And so to me, peace, internal peace, is how much you want to party with yourself, how much you want to get involved in, do you want to dig deep and hard and fast, or do you want to just pick away at it bit by bit, nice and easy? How much you want to get after it in a walk and how much you want to get after it in your life is how much you will get out of life, how much you'll get out of a walk. But no one has to get maximum effort on day one. No one has to get maximum out of a mental health walk on day one of mental health walk. So I think everyone's just got to understand there's a not a polar opposite effect, but there's an effect where you've got to go hard, but maybe not too hard. But it's for you to decide how hard you go on getting peace, which is weird to say that you've kind of got to go to war to get peace. You've got to go hard to go easy. You've got to go all in to rise to the top and not be all in. You've got to almost apply some dichotomous effects where it almost doesn't feel normal, because normal is where you're at and you're pursuing something other than normal. So you've got to change things up a little bit. You've got to add a little bit more, we'll call it spice, to life to be able to gain the peace that you want. Because the peace you're seeking probably requires a bit of work. And that work is probably not kicking it back and trying to be peaceful with yourself. Peaceful is sometimes mistermed as taking it really easy on yourself. Just peace out, bro. Peace out doesn't mean go to sleep for the rest of your life. Peace is within yourself, not the external action of kicking it back and relaxing. So to get peace, sometimes you've got to go hard. To get peace, sometimes you've got to do things that are uncomfortable. To get peace, sometimes you've got to go for a walk with a group of people that you don't know that is going to bring you peace.
Yeah, 100%. Sarah, you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think that that's just such a great point, and I've actually had this conversation with a few people multiple times this year, but the road to peace can often feel like complete chaos. And what peace to me might not be peace to Shaun or Seb or you, right? And it's just based off of how we view the world and our different inputs. But just because it feels challenging to go through to get there doesn't mean the reward isn't there at the end.
Absolutely, Seb. Thoughts on this?
Yeah, there's lots of stuff that flow from this. I mean, the way I see it is some people perceive stagnation as peace. Stagnation isn't peace. So, I mentioned earlier, seek it, hold it, protect it, and defend it. Well, that's exactly it. And there's a Latin saying for this, si vis pacem para bellum. If you want peace, prepare for war. Right? There is a reason, and that's metaphorically applicable in this context, obviously, but sometimes it's also physically applicable, depending what the circumstances are. But yeah, that's pretty much it for me. Just don't think that stagnation or the comfort zone that you are in is what being at peace with yourself means. Don't confuse that, and be ready to compromise your peace on account of a greater benefit. So compromise your peace, in a calculated way to be able to reach a higher level of peace. So it's always that cost benefit action, so to speak.
100%. I really like where you're going with this, and I think that it bears some exploring. Is that if we have, for us that have, we've been to war, we've dealt with physical war where you're actually fighting, usually those people are want peace more than anybody else, right? Because we've seen the extent of what it can be, and we desire the opposite the most. But I do love the fact that it requires, as Shaun said, the dichotomous effect. If you don't ever explore beyond what you know, you will never be able to see or feel what the extents are, right? And to to actively go to war with yourself in order to bring peace, I think is a beautiful concept. And what where would you begin? And I mean, where would you begin? Not how would you tell other people to do it. I want to know specifically, you guys, where would you begin? Shaun, I'm going to start with you first, actually.
So something that you'd said that I'm not disagreeing with, I'm just proposing that there's a broader bandwidth to the conversation that maybe you left out. And that is, if someone goes to war, it doesn't mean that they have a better understanding of the value of peace. It just means that they went to war.
True.
And then it's for them to figure the rest out.
True.
And so there are people who haven't figured that part out. They haven't figured out that peace within themselves is something to pursue now, because sometimes the quietness within them, sometimes the quietness of the room, sometimes the quietness of not having chaos all around you is not very peaceful. And therefore, they don't like, and therefore, they don't stay there. And therefore, they're always seeking chaos. They're always seeking war. They're always seeking discomfort. They're always seeking things that are the opposite of peace. And so that is a thing. And it is a thing more than just a couple of guys. It's a lot of people that seek that because the thought of peace is unsettling. When it's that quiet in the room by yourself where you're seeking peace, it's maybe too quiet. That is unsettling. If the environment that you feel most alive in is chaos, and then someone says, just go over there and namaste out for a bit, bro, that is unsettling for some people. And more than just one, as I said. So what to do with that? And that's where I was at one point, where I just loved the chaos so much that namaste was the chaos, and the chaos was the namaste. And so, I threw on a pair of hiking boots and I went and explored the world. And so along the way, I learned that there's a bandwidth of chaos and peace that I could start interacting with. So I had to go out and journey to understand that I could kind of edge my way out of the chaos towards peace. And along that way, I could establish almost not like mile markers or not like little flags that I could stick in the ground and say, okay, I'm 10% closer to peace. What I did do was I just explored and expanded and tried to understand things that made me uncomfortable, like peace. And so it takes a while. It takes an adventure. Might take a few years, like it did for me. But I don't think it's as easy as you threw a grenade one day, and then the next day you wake up and say, well, I don't have to throw grenades anymore. Welcome to Peaceville. I don't think it works like that. The steps from chaos to peace are more than just one step. And I think that step can sometimes feel like a step up Mount Everest for some people, so they never take the step. So peace eludes them because it is a lot of work to go from chaos to peace, particularly when you're good at chaos. And so, Chance, I'm not pushing back hard. I'm just saying that my personal experience was it was not easy to go from chaos to peace.
Great clarification, and you're absolutely right. It took me a while as well. Sarah, you got thoughts on this at all?
No, I just agree with Shaun. It's that, especially for myself, I used to feel like I thrived in chaos. Like I would overschedule myself. I put way more on my plate. I loved very hard things because I felt that like I thrived in chaos. And it wasn't until I exceeded my personal bandwidth that I realized that I was struggling and that I was not healthy and that I needed to make a change to be a whole person again and to really be comfortable in my silence and in my peace. You know, I could walk up, a big hike, right, a 14er in Colorado, and I loved it. I felt like I was thriving. It was so challenging. I loved how my lungs would burn at altitude, but it was, it was like fake peace. It was not a true peace. It was, this is challenging, and the physical strain that I exert my body through makes my mind quiet versus actually sitting and understanding that my mind isn't quiet and my internal thoughts and sense of self are what my personal peace are.
Imposing peace. I like that. Seb, thoughts on this?
Yeah, so many things. I know for myself, I was kind of in Shaun's position where the imposition of chaos was a lot more comfortable for me than anything that had nothing to do with chaos. But I think ultimately, after some introspection, I came to the realization that I was trying to control things. And if you hurt yourself first, life doesn't hurt you. And when I say hurt, I don't mean it necessarily in a sort of nefarious way or anything like that. But if you're creating enough challenges within yourself, you're not fearful of what's coming next. It's not like you're waiting for something to come around the bend that you don't see coming, and all of a sudden you're completely blindsided. No, this is my daily activity. I do uncomfortable things. I get into chaos. I get to control chaos to a certain extent, and I thrive in that. I think that over the decades, because definitely this was, a 20s and 30s kind of state of mind for me anyways, and somebody else might beat me to the punch and be there a lot before me, and I wish you that, because once you start discovering that peace does not encroach on your ability to control chaos if chaos comes, now you're able to maintain a little bit more bandwidth in relation to where you invest your energy and where you invest your emotions and how you interact with the world, instead of being sort of on a metaphorical high alert at all times. So I can be extremely peaceful 1 minute and be in a completely different world the next. But I don't try to create it in advance so it doesn't happen. I just have now the ability to adapt to what is coming through that door without overthinking, without over processing, without trying to make it happen so that I can exert some control. Because at the end of the day, we have control over one thing in this life, and that's us and our reactions. That's about it. Anything that's external, you have zero control over, or very little. And so that's kind of what Shaun's point made me sort of elaborate on.
Yeah, absolutely. Shaun, you got any additional points to this?
I do. It's what Sarah had mentioned. I'm sure it's what Seb could have spoken about as well, and that is finding things to evade the peaceful moments. So, just like Sarah climbing up 14ers in Colorado, I was doing 24-hour solo mountain bike races, a boatload of them, and all the other 6 and 8 and 12-hour races. It's not that I was trying to avoid peace. I was just engaged in what I enjoy, and that is chaos. And so I was more comfortable in chaos and hardships and adversity and difficult things than I am where I just sit down, cross my legs, and empty my mind. I don't mind emptying my mind. I do it on the regular. But when I was 24-hour solo mountain bike racing, I wasn't doing it as regular. I was still developing my bandwidth. And to Seb's point, now I've got a very wide bandwidth. I can flip my script in a split second, and I can go really hard to the left and really hard to the right on peace versus chaos. And I like it, man. I like having such a broad bandwidth, and I like being able to hang out in either spot as long as I want, or as long as is required, or as long as I want to explore either end of the bandwidth, or hang out in the middle. I can slide back and forth really easy now. But there was a time when I couldn't. There was a time when I had to explore, not an ability, but an opportunity. Exploring the opportunity of understanding what chaos means to me and what peace means to me every year. And so I'm at a point now where I have a better relationship with both of those things. I better understand both of those things. And next year it'll be better again. And I think that that is probably something that needs to be mentioned, is that I believe that it's not just a pass go situation where it's just a checkbox situation where at the age of 37 and a half, you crack the dolphin language called peace, and all of a sudden, big check mark, and now you're full peace mode, bro. You understand all the peace. I don't think it works like that. I think that it takes at least a few days, if not a few years, to get a better relationship with what your understanding of peace is. Now, let's say you're the most peaceful person out there. Let's say my neighbor's mega peace. I think that if I've got 5 minutes, I can pick a number of books off of my bookshelf, walk them over to my neighbor, hand him the book and say, just chillax with this for a few days, and then get back to me. Guaranteed their definition of peace is going to be adjusted, because I've got books up there that can adjust your definition of peace. It's not just books. It's not just podcasts. It's not just movies. It's not just talking with someone. It's also talking with yourself in relationship to, what do these things mean to me? You don't need any external variables, any external vectors from a book or what have you. You don't need any of that. You can sit with yourself and redefine what peace means to you. But it takes time to think about these things. It takes time for you to move the internal needle of your understanding by sitting down quietly with yourself and trying to understand these things. They're not just little flashes that occur like an illuminated moment. Bam, you understand it perfectly now. Bam, oh, you understand it even better than yesterday. They're not just magical moments that appear in front of your nose. They're things that require work, conscious effort to consider, what does peace mean to me this week versus last week? And external devices like books or friends can help adjust that calibration of what it means to you. And by adjust, I don't mean like give you all the pro tips that easily breadcrumb you down the perfect trail. I'm talking about, it can be challenging ideas. You can sit down and be challenged by some thoughts of some people, like maybe in this podcast, some of the ideas that are being spit out throughout this hour will challenge you to consider what peace means to you. And if it's really challenging, that's good. That's going to help you sit down and think about what your thoughts mean to you in context of what your thoughts mean to the guest panel. And somewhere between those two thoughts, you'll find that you might end up in between the middle of those two thoughts. And now you've moved your needle. Now you're thinking about your thinking. And so to bring it back to perhaps some veterans who love the chaos, well, when you establish in your head that, bro, I'm all about the chaos. Now you've got a locked mindset, not a growth mindset. A locked mindset that says, I'm all about the chaos. I don't need the peace. Just bring the chaos, 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 chaos. Well, if you listen to the guests, you'll hear that peace isn't a bad thing. And if you sit with that for a day and think, maybe it isn't a bad thing. Maybe if you challenge yourself to, maybe I should consider peace. Now you're a richer person for it. You're a more three-dimensional human being. Because if all you think is that chaos is the way, you're only living half a life. You've given up the other half called, I wonder what that peace thing is like. And I'm talking about peace internally, not the external chaos, but the internal chaos that you're no doubt feeling if all you ever focus on is external chaos. So you've got to find ways to challenge yourself. You've got to find ways to not settle. Because again, no matter who you are, however squared away you think you are, however Buddha-like you've achieved a level of enlightenment, well, you can always do better. You can always be more by next year, simply by not settling with your thoughts.
Yeah, 100%. Seb, you got any thoughts on this? I saw you taking notes.
I always take notes. I'm just not very good at remembering things, as you know. Really good point made by both guests here. One of the things that I like to reflect on is that peace and chaos are not mutually exclusive. Like, you don't have to always separate them, and I'll give a few examples of that. So when I first joined the force, I was out of the military and I joined the RCMP, and I went in and we were shooting targets, and I still had that mentality where when a target's in front of you, it's a deadly enemy, and you must stop it at all costs. And don't get me wrong, that's always the plan. But over the years, and with my years on certain units, I started seeing it as a refinement of my own skills. This is a weaponization of bringing all of the little tools together so that I'm able to deliver in a way that's satisfactory for the standard that I have to uphold or the standard that I have to exceed. And it stopped becoming about having an emotional reaction to another human being try to kill me, if that makes any sense. And I think that it allowed me to shoot, move, communicate, and do it with some violence of action and some conviction without ever breaking my peace, because I was actually sharpening the sword. I was sharpening my own sword. I was controlling my own factors. I wasn't responding to anything other than what needed to be done so that I could be the man I needed to be to stand shoulder to shoulders with giants. And so I think that there's another aspect to this, which is an aspect that I spoke about before, which is imposing chaos or imposing violence on others. In the context of we've all been hurt, and if you've been extensively bullied, it's very easy to look at other men and impose violence on them, especially when you're capable of it now in a real meaningful way. And I think that for years I hated the world for how life had treated me. I was in a full-out victimhood, so to speak, and I was walking around carrying it everywhere with me, and I imposed violence on people that definitely didn't deserve it. And I don't mean physical violence, but just the thoughts, of it. And I think it was obviously a self-protection mechanism, and I realized that, but it's also very unhealthy because it didn't affect them. They didn't know what I was talking about, but certainly it affected me. They didn't know what was going on in my head, but it affected me. And to a certain extent, it probably affected them also, because I was projecting, what it is that I was thinking. And so over the years, I started looking at things very differently, and I started seeking ways to understand people. So I don't see arrogance as the same way as I used to see it a decade ago. Now, when I see arrogance, I see it from a place of compassion. There's insecurities and a variety of different things here. And this is quite obvious. It's a big symptomology of this. So I now see it from a place of compassion. So if somebody comes in and they rub me the wrong way because I feel like there's some arrogance there, I will have some tools to see other possible angle to the problem instead of automatically get my back up and this guy's an arrogant prick and, I should do X, Y, and Z and fight fire with fire, which hardly ever works. But anyways, so yeah, those two concepts to me have been life altering, and playing and exploring within the confines of those two contexts really help raise my level of inner peace for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Sarah, thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I'm going to tell a story, and it'll seem a little off topic, but it'll kind of tie back into what Seb was just speaking about. So I had a patient the other day, and she turns 100, actually next month. Just this really, really neat old woman. She takes like one medication and has a pacemaker. That's all that's wrong with her. And I said, what, like, if you could give one piece of advice to anyone, what would it be? And she's like, well, do you mean to live as old as I am? And I was like, no, ma'am. I just like, what would be your one bit of advice? And she goes, you have to let the negative go and only focus on the positive. And her sense of peace and maintaining and protecting that personal peace through all of her life's hardships, she feels like that's how she has achieved such a long life. And this woman exudes joy. It was such a treat to meet her. But, as Seb was talking about, if we are reactionary and we go through life without that sense of peace, we lose our humanity and our compassion. And you can tell the people who have done work and who have more of that internal peace tend to err on the side of compassion. And as you work on that for yourself, you start to notice that in other people. And so that you can align your environment to support your own peace with people who are like minded in the investment and protection of their own peace as well.
Yeah, this is it's a really great concept. I'm just thinking that I wrote down here, switches to sliders, and I think that this is something that we need to kind of develop in a lot of us. I know for myself, I used to have, it was a switch, right? It was either I'm peaceful or I'm not, right? There's just back and forth. There's no other options there. And as I've learned more about myself, I've spent more time with myself as I started working on the things um, that I struggled with, that started opening up new slots. So it wasn't just peaceful or not. It was peaceful and semi-peaceful and semi-not peaceful and semi-chaotic. And, you start to add those in. And as you add more of those slots, it becomes more of a slider than it does switches into different spots. But I'm wondering, do you think that it is do you think that it's more about defining it yourself, just trying to like picture it in your own head, how am I gonna get from A to B, right? How do I get from peaceful to not peaceful or peaceful to chaotic? And then once you have that kind of defined, I guess, within your own self, how do we start developing those slots? How do we start finding those different pieces, those different um, areas in which we can add to the slider bar rather than limit it to those selector switches, if that makes any sense? Shaun, I'm going to come to you with this one first. What do you think?
I think that it'll never happen. Nothing will ever happen if all this person is doing is thinking. You can think all day long for the rest of your life, and you'll have no more slider spots. It just requires action. It requires less thought, and it requires more action. And so if you're used to about 1 million thoughts in your head per day and achieving absolutely nothing, that's your norm. That's the baseline. The baseline is I'm going to spend all day long thinking about peace and how to get peace and what my next step is for peace. And tomorrow, guess what? You're doing the exact same thing. What's my first step towards peace again? What did I establish yesterday? And so that's just the way it is, man. Thoughts versus action. What it requires is action. And if you don't know what your first action step is, call a buddy who seems to be kind of squared away in that area. And if you don't want to call someone, frickin' pick anything. Pick something to do something towards getting towards a closer point towards peace, whatever that means. And you could go in the completely wrong direction. You could go in a 180 to peace. And you know what'll happen? The following day, you'll course correct because you realize that you're on a back bearing. You're on the wrong bearing. And so any action will lead you towards betterment as long as you are, wait for it, pause 2, 3, consistent in your effort towards becoming better. You screwed it up yesterday, big deal. Who cares? Today's a better opportunity to do it right. You screwed up today, who cares? Big deal. Tomorrow's a better opportunity to do it right. Eventually, with some consistency, Might take you a week, a month, a year, a decade. None of that matters. Eventually, you'll get to where you're supposed to be through consistency of action. And so if you want to get there faster, what you do is you align with people who've been there and done that. If you want to get there faster, you pick up a book that'll help clarify a better way to get there, wherever there is for you. And so it's all under your control to get to where you need to be. The part there that goes wrong, where it all falls apart, is that consistency of action. You cannot solve this thing laying on the couch thinking about how to solve it. You can only solve it by stepping off the couch and engaging in a consistency of action every single day, even if it's just a tiny little action today. Just the tiniest of tiny steps today gets you one tiny step closer to the outcome that you're seeking, which is finding more peace.
Absolutely. Sarah, thoughts on this?
I like that Shaun really pointed out that it takes action. I think sometimes maybe it might be misleading as we sit here and we talk and, essentially pontificate on all of these ideas about how to achieve, a better life. But what's missing here is that every person that you've had on this podcast, I would confidently wager, is a person of action. And they do these things every day to be better at their field, their scope, or whatever pursuit it is that they have in their lives. And we talk about these things, but every day, I would say confidently that all of us are picking up books, making calls, signing up for walks that we might have otherwise felt uncomfortable doing before, to get closer to where we want to be as people.
Absolutely. Seb, thoughts on this?
Yeah, very briefly. I mean, I think that was what was just discussed is extremely important because we preach, and when I say preach, I mean this in the most positive way, but we often preach forward momentum at all cost. And I think that people tend to mistake the fact that sometimes forward momentum means going backwards for a little while, because stagnation is worse than going backwards for a little while to realize that you're doing the wrong thing so that you can push through a certain plateau in the seeking of your peace or anything else for that matter that makes your life better. And so that's something that shouldn't create any issues, because let's correlate this to traffic. Most people hate being in traffic for 3 hours. And if I said to you, I'm going to give you a route that takes longer, but you move all along, most people would take that. I'd rather drive for 5 hours than 3 in bumper to bumper traffic. And so this is a simple analogy, and I don't know if it's going to make any sense to anybody else, but it sure does in my head. It's the realization that yes, we are all for forward momentum and to head towards the bearing that we had set for ourselves in the spirit of a desired outcome. But sometimes that means going the other way for a little while until we realize we're doing it incorrectly and we correct course.
Yeah, I think this is a great correlation to the idea of being peaceful versus being harmless. And I think that what we're talking about is like you can only be peaceful. I guess you can't only be you were, in my mind, to be peaceful, you have to really understand what chaos is. If you have no idea what chaos is, but you are just living your life, that you're harmless. You're not actually. You don't have the capability of violence, of action, in order. No, you don't think so? What are you thinking? What do you got, Shaun? I see you shaking your head.
Well, if you're saying that, I mean, that's just not fact. I mean, that's your loosely formed opinion that I think you just quickly cobbled up, but I don't agree with that at all. I mean, there's monks out there that have never scrapped in their life, and they're some of the most peaceful people that you can meet, and peaceful internally as well as externally. So I don't think you need to face chaos in order to understand peacefulness. I think that there's people who've spent their entire life dialing into being peaceful, and they've never put on a pair of combat boots. And they're some of the most peaceful, understanding people in the world. And so I don't think it takes one to understand the other. I don't think you've got to do all the hardships in the world in order to understand what all the peaceful things are in the world. There's just people out there that have focused on peace, and that's it. That's all. And they're really good at it. But that doesn't mean that they're complete human beings. That's a completely different subject. So you can be peaceful and never have tasted chaos. And you can be really, really, really good at peace. But that doesn't make you three-dimensional. That makes you really, really, really good at peace. So I just wanted to put that across.
That's an interesting concept. Seb, you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there's a much broader conversation to be had with that, and I mean, I know that Jordan Peterson obviously spoke to this, and I heard the saying before, and I heard the conversation before. I think it's taken out of context a little bit as far as inner peace versus what he was referring to is having a capacity for violence. If you don't have that, you're at the mercy of everybody essentially. But that was a different context. In the context of inner peace, and as Shaun alluded to, I think it's different. And what I do think in sort of my mind immediately went there was, what is the ability of somebody that's been at peace their entire life, have never faced chaos, to maintain that peace when chaos comes to them? And it's just an exploratory question, right? Like, it's not, I don't have a thought either way, but I think I believe personally that you'd be hard pressed to have the ability to weaponize your peace nearly as much as somebody that's had that. But it's not to say, and again, to Shaun's point, that's where that well-roundedness might fall a little bit short, right? So I think it's a very important concept and context in putting context around our peace and our chaos, and going from one to the other, and bringing our peace within the confines of chaos. So let's look at, for example, entering a jiu-jitsu tournament. The first time you do it, you're fighting for your life at every match. And eventually, and this is no different than the story I was telling earlier about shooting with an intent and shooting with the intent of getting better. And then eventually it goes from, I'm fighting for my life, to I'm trying to apply the techniques that I've learned and practiced over and over again. And really, what the person that's in front of me matters not. It's all about me, and not in a, obviously not in a condescending way, but just, I need to focus on me so that I may get better. So now what you have done is you've effectively taken your peace into chaos. And so there is extreme value in doing that from a well-roundedness perspective. But just food for thoughts, just some thoughts to explore.
Absolutely. Sarah, you got any thoughts on this?
I guess it's just more of a question, but Seb, it sounds to me like you're alluding to the resiliency, right, of the person and being able to manage the spectrum of their peace and their chaos.
Mm-hmm. Seb, what do you think?
Yeah, I suppose we can call it resiliency, but I think that, I guess it is resiliency to a certain extent, but I do believe that it leads into a process that allows you to understand that you don't need to be black or white. And I think humans are horrible at shades. Like we operate in shades, but we live in black and white. It's all or nothing. If I change something, I change absolutely everything. If I love something, I love it. If I don't love it, I hate it. And all of those things are incredibly disturbing to your peace. It ultimately is, because you're affected by absolutely everything that isn't in the flavor of the moment. Everything. And so you're unable to see the nuances and things, and that affects your peace. And we see it now with divisiveness on the social media, and so on and so forth. Of course, we stepped away from the tribe, and that's not helping. But all of those things, I think, can really make a person understand that there are nuances to things, and it's not all of one or all of the other. So I see it that way. So I guess at the end of the day, we can call it resiliency for sure.
Shaun, you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm going to give it a different framework maybe, and that it works for my head anyway. It's what I'm trying to do in my life nowadays, and it's the artist's way. So, and that's because of freaking Miyamoto Musashi. For some reason, I've got a target lock on that dude for a while now. And when he was in chaos, when he was in war, when he was fighting deadly duels all across Japan, there probably wasn't much peace in him. But at some point, he started writing, and at some point, he started painting, calligraphy initially. And so he was pursuing his artistic life. He was pursuing how to kind of put creation out into the world, not just with his swords, but with his other attributes that he was exploring. So in a way, he was adventuring about what else he could create in his world and in a different form than cutting off heads. And so now he had a paintbrush. Now he was painting instead of swording. And through that process, I believe he was probably seeking some peace from the life that he'd led. I'm inferring. I don't know. He's dead. I can't talk to him. But I consider him, and I consider that he might have come out of that phase of war internally, that he was externally projecting on anyone who looked at him wrong. And then he shifted to understanding himself a little bit more, picked up a paintbrush, and started expressing himself in that way. And I think that through that process, he became a more complete human being. I think that he became more relevant and relatable in our modern world. If the Dakota and anything that he ever wrote or anything that he ever did, if it was all about chaos and war, if that's the only lesson that he put out, then it wouldn't be relatable to as many people as it has been. And therefore, he had to become something more than just a head cutter. He had to create more wisdom within himself in order to gain the traction that he gained once he was dead by anyone who's ever picked up his book and can understand that there's more wisdom in this than just how to keep a blade sharp. So he had to explore himself. And through that process, I'm sure it wasn't very peaceful. He secluded himself in a cave and sat in there and thought about what he was going to write, what he had learned, what he would put out into the world. And I'm sure it wasn't very peaceful internally for him to come up with these considerations, the things that he was going to write down. I'm sure it was uncomfortable sometimes, some of the thoughts that he had. So there is chaos while you are in the peace until you get peace with the chaos. And then he produced a book or two. And so I look at that guy, Miyamoto Musashi, as a good example of what chaos can turn into. And then what that thing that it turns into, can then produce for the world. So on a singular journey, he's impacted a chunk of the world, our modern world, currently. So I think we all have it in us to become an artist, to pick up a paintbrush of life, to gain the nuance or the granularity of the world in front of us and produce something that impacts those around us in a way that somehow is tangible, whether it's through art or through spoken word or through movies or what have you, standing next to someone in a coffee shop lineup. I think we all have it in us to create art in our three-dimensional world just by choosing our words carefully or by putting your hand on someone's shoulder in a certain way and nodding at them. I think you can create art in the real world. You can expose your peacefulness, whatever you've got in you, to artistically impact the world around you in ways that you don't understand. And so how best to start doing that? Well, again, actions. You've got to consider what you've got in you right now that is peaceful and figure out how to play with it in the broader world around you. And it doesn't have to be through art or through spoken word. It can just be simply smiling a bit more with your eyes, perhaps, at the person that's walking towards you down a sidewalk. If you've never explored that level of artistry, well, guess what? You've got an entire lifetime worth of artistry in front of you that you can play with you'll die before you ever fully explore that talent, that ability, that artwork that you can play with. And so all around us and all inside of us, we've got all of this peacefulness that we can play with, that we have yet to understand, that will only become present once we explore deep enough to unearth it.
Yeah, I really like the idea of of being able to paint with peace into life. I think that's great. Seb, I saw you writing down some notes. What do you got?
There's lots there. We won't have time for most of it, but at the end of the day, and I really like everything that Shaun just said there. It comes down to a heightened sense of, or a heightened consciousness, so to speak. I really like that. I think one of the mistakes that we make, one of the many mistakes that we make as we negotiate life, is to see things very siloed. And no wonder we do, because we see life as a linear process. We see time as a linear process. We see all of those things, and the more we discover about these principles, the more we realize that it actually might not be the case. There has been some incredible breakthrough in the world, in the world of astrophysics this year, for example, that challenges that version of the Big Bang, for example. And you guys can do some research on that, but it's some incredible breakthrough this year that show kind of a bit of a different piece. And so I like to do the interconnection piece, which is, we often speak about how jiu-jitsu is metaphorically applicable to life, and that's because we love it. But guess what? So is raising flowers. So is these other things. So arts. So is art. So is it the expression of yourself in whatever medium you want it to be. And once we start looking at life as a silo, where we're selecting things, I don't like that, I like this. I don't like that, I like this. And we set hard lines. The mind works kind of like a parachute, open. If the mind is closed, you are going to keep yourself within the confines of a hallway or a box that you're stuck in. And so I really like the artistic. You're not artistic? Good. Go do it. See what happens, And to realize that there's so much interconnection. So one of the stories I've told a million times over is me listening to always to the same type of podcasts many years ago. It was a Jocko. It was a podcast about battles and all these historical. And I felt like I was doing a fantastic job of learning, but I didn't learn as much as when I started learning about flowers, when I started learning about time, the concept of it, when I started I started really expanding and downloading podcasts that at face value I would have zero interest in. And next thing I knew, I was now diversifying and creating additional lenses that I was able to apply against my reality and challenge a variety of things that I was completely stuck in. I was self-institutionalized, if that makes any sense. And so I do believe that there's extreme value in doing that. And not only extreme value, you're going to start doing it sooner and later. That's a fact, because you're going to realize that that's the best way to go. But the best part about it is, if I started at 40 and you listen to this and you're 20, you can start now. You just heard it right here.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. Sarah, any thoughts on this?
No, I don't really have anything to add. I agree with both gentlemen wholeheartedly on this.
Absolutely. This is it's a tough one to follow, that's for sure. We are just about just about out of time. I do really, first off, appreciate the conversation, Sarah, Shaun, Seb. This has been great. Lots of different realms that we've gone into here, and yeah, it's been fantastic. I have a couple comments I want to hit on just before we shut her down. John jumped in here, said Merry Christmas all, or Happy Holiday, especially those deployed or working. Absolutely. Vanessa Chaos, Merry Christmas Collective crew. And just always good to see there's some chirping back and forth between the crew, between the people here, which is awesome. Daniel put in some great questions, but I'm going to hit those tomorrow because I think they're going to apply to tomorrow's conversation. So Daniel, make sure you come back for that. It's going to be good. Let's hit some final thoughts on peace as a definition, as a thought process, as a paintbrush. Anything at all still bubbling in the back of your minds. Sarah, how about you? What do you think?
So I just would restate that, peace is, as Seb said, it's not a linear process, right? It's an active engagement. It's something that we work on and come in and out of. And don't feel discouraged in your journey if you feel like you are in the absolute center of your own chaos. Quite potentially you might be near your own breakthrough.
Yeah, Absolutely, Seb. Final thoughts?
Just go out there and engage in the process, you guys.
I like it. Shaun, final thoughts?
Yep. Create some action to start moving in a direction, any direction, and not just for yourself, not just the peacefulness within you, but the peacefulness that you'll exude to others around you. You're muted.
Of course, the button didn't click. I do really appreciate the convo. I don't have much to add. It has been a fantastic conversation to be a part of. All I'll say is, again, continue to learn, continue to build, continue to grow. And you can do that with us every day on the collective. We'll see you all tomorrow. Chimo.
Chimo.